Alright, we're gonna start with Guardians of the Galaxy. Something that was on my most anticipated list, so that may have set it up for a fall. No, it didn't.
No.
Well, it starts off immediately, you know you may not get like a traditional Marvel movie when James Gunn's attached to it. The director of stuff like Slither and Super. And sure enough, immediately, we don't even get a logo, it just starts. And we get Star-Lord's backstory about his dying mom before we get the Marvel logo. Oh, and don't worry, you don't have to pay attention to the beginning because there's no possible way whatsoever that a lot of that scene's going to come back in heavy-handed symbolism later. Now, I was a little worried at first because the entire first half hour or so is a lot of packing in information.
Oh, yeah.
They throw a whole lot at you at the very beginning, and this movie has so many characters in it. We start off, well, first off, there's not a whole lot devoted to character development because, basically, apparently the only thing you need to know about Star-Lord is that his mom died when he was young, because it jumps 26 years later, right after that happens. And he's given a mysterious present to not open until she dies, but he doesn't open it for the next 26 years anyway. And while he's out and finds this orb, which is basically the thing in this movie that every single character wants for one reason or another, he runs into Jaimin Hounsou, who happens to work for Ronan, who is Leatface, who is basically working with Thanos, who you saw teased at the end of the Avengers, who's voiced by an uncredited Josh Brolin, you can really tell. And then there's Thanos' daughter, who's Zoe Saldana, basically playing the girl at the beginning of Star Trek, that the alien that Kirk banged. Instead of becoming Uhura, she becomes that green alien. But anyway, and then we have this scene where, oh, actually before that even, we're introduced to Michael Rooker. And Michael Rooker basically raised Star-Lord from a child, more or less. He's the one that abducts him at the beginning. And then things happen and he puts a bounty on him because of the orb. So the person that decides they want to go after this bounty is Rocket Raccoon. An animated raccoon voiced by Bradley Cooper, who has a friend with him who is his partner, who is a giant tree named Groot that's voiced by Vin Diesel. Who, despite his prominent credit, only has one line throughout the entire movie he just has to repeat.
Actually, no. There is a variation later on.
Yes. So, that was kind of spoilery, I wasn't going to say that, but it's out there now. And we have this scene, and this is all happening really fast, by the way. This is like within the span of 15 minutes now. Conveniently, all these characters have converged in the same place.
Very conveniently.
And that's when John C. Reilly shows up to take them all and put them in a sort of prison. And it was hard to keep up with for a while because they're throwing so much of this at you at once. And all of these characters. And we're also introduced to Batista, who is this giant, basically indestructible monster who is funny because he takes everything literally. He doesn't understand figures of speech or anything. I'm not being sarcastic either, that does have a lot of funny scenes.
Yes, very much so.
And that's basically what your plot is. Obviously, for the first half or so, it's a prison break movie of sorts. But then it goes into, you know, Ronan gets the orb, he has, you know, the power, and they have to stop him. And Batista's character has a grudge because his family was killed by him. I'll talk about the very first thing I was concerned about, which was the casting of Chris Pratt as the star of this movie. To which my first thought was, not often, usually they're really good about it, but sometimes Marvel has this problem where it can't seem to balance what it's doing and the comedy. Lately they all want to be way too funny anymore, to where they're almost practically in the genre of comedy. So that worried me that they cast Chris Pratt. And he's surprisingly good. I mean, a lot of people have faith in him, so
Yeah.
I'm pretty much the only one saying surprisingly. But I was afraid this movie was just going to basically be a flat-out comedy when he was cast.
Yeah.
Given Marvel's, light way of doing things. It just seemed like a recipe for something that was going to be a little uneven. Especially when you have a director like James Gunn, who has gone to the dark places that he has gone, despite making more or less comedies. Slither was basically a comedy, if you look at it the right way.
It's nice seeing him and Michael Rooker back together, too.
Wherever you find James Gunn, you'll find Michael Rooker. Even when they did when James Gunn was doing Scream Queens, he brought Michael Rooker in for an exercise.
Yeah, I remember that, actually.
Because Rooker's also one of the Kevin Bacon's henchmen in Super, which Kevin Bacon is referenced a lot.
Yeah, it really is.
Which is a little ridiculous in retrospect, but, it's alright. It's all in good fun. This whole movie is basically all in good fun.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people were worried about Rocket Raccoon, which Marvel was embracing, because James Gunn came out and said, don't give Rocket Raccoon shit because he's the heart of the movie. And then there was that, internet meme where somebody was making fun of Nolan's Batman trilogy, and they said, oh, you're trying real hard to be, you want to be really grounded in reality, you want to make everything all realistic, right? Well, Marvel's giving us this, and it's a picture of Rocket Raccoon with his giant gun.
Yeah.
And yes, as weird as it is to say, James Gunn was right, because Rocket Raccoon is the strongest character in the movie.
Yes.
He has, the most development and the most, not so much backstory, so much as just gives you something to make you care about him. And he's the one that's, his motives are absolutely front and center to him. And I guess now that we're talking about Rocket Raccoon and how good of a character he is, we can talk about the effects. Because I was worried immediately because I wanted to do the very first Showtime that they had today.
Yeah.
And I was not very pleased to learn that was a 3D showing. Because lately... the effects in this are really great.
Yeah, 3D works really well.
Yeah, the 3D surprisingly did it, especially when they go to this place called Nowhere, K-N-O-W.
Yeah.
That looks really great with the 3D and the effects, and how they make it seem like this massive place, and all the battle scenes. Normally you would think it would be they would look really run together, and you wouldn't know who's who or who's shooting at what or whatever, like a Transformers movie. Yeah, the battle scenes are really, really on a massive scale, and really... Which is good, because there was a lot of build-up with basically the giant climax of the Avengers, basically set up what the action scenes in this movie were going to be like. And they do really pay off and don't disappoint. And nothing feels half-assed, which is a real... I really hate having to say that, because there's so many big-budget movies nowadays, and so many of them look so fake.
Oh yeah, it's ridiculous.
This isn't a problem here, even in the 3D, because 3D tends to actually make effects look worse a lot of the time, but that's not the case here, thankfully. Now, obviously, the one reason that I think, obviously, this is around the time we start talking Oscar talk, for visual effects. If there were no giant battle scenes, or if there was no places like Nowhere in this movie, I still think this would have secured a slot for a visual effects nomination just on Rocket Raccoon alone.
Completely agreed.
Because that's not even to mention Groot yet.
Yeah.
The detail that went into Rocket Raccoon is so great, and I'm going to give Bradley Cooper credit, because usually when you bring high-profile celebrities in to do voices, it's pretty much just the character and then their voice over it, and you can really tell. If I didn't know it was Bradley Cooper, I don't think I would have known.
No.
Because he
changed his voice, definitely.
I don't know what he did, but he changed his voice somehow to where I'm pretty sure if I didn't know, I don't think I would have been able to pinpoint it was him. But the thing is they put so many subtleties in him, which is awesome. Like the scene where he's, like when he's sleeping and when he wakes up and the hair on the side of his face is matted down. Or, there's after they've gotten the orb back, after they've seen what it does, and he does the thing where he grabs his face and looks at Saldana and says, "Why do you still have that?" And he like pulls his face down, and you see all the detail of that. And then the great scene, the scene that really like tugs on the heartstrings, if you even catch this, when he's doing the thing where Rocket Raccoon is drunk and he's throwing a fit because everybody's making fun of him.
Yeah.
And when they're telling him he needs to calm down and put the gun away, he starts to get really human in his emotion because he starts to scream like he's tired of being called rodent and vermin and stuff like that. And when he says that Batista called him vermin, you can see his lip quiver.
Yeah.
And it's really sad. And I really liked how much detail they put into him.
Definitely.
There's a scene at the end where he has to cry, and it's really heartbreaking. That detail is perfect. Now on to Groot, who is basically the Guardians of the Galaxy's Hulk.
Yeah.
Exactly, basically. At the end, he even gets his version of the ragdoll scene.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
And I love the interaction between him and Rocket Raccoon, because even though all he can say is "I am Groot," all he has to do is say it in like with a different like inflection on a word, and he and Rocket Raccoon can have whole conversations.
Exactly.
But there are a couple of things here that are kind of off. Like I said, there's a lot of like really blatant things where they set up something just for it to be a payoff. There may be some, like, you know, fanboy or nerd that gets pissed off at me for calling out, because it's probably a comics thing. Star-Lord's most prized possession is a tape player that his mom gave him. I don't know if that's a comics thing or not, but to me, that tape player is such an important plot point solely because this movie can have a popular soundtrack.
Yeah,
I think that's the only reason it's there.
Got a lot of Watchmen vibes from the soundtrack.
Not near as good as the Watchmen soundtrack.
No, but it was trying.
And there's this scene, okay, there's this big scene in the middle that was really, really disappointing, because it's the one scene that they set up at the end of Thor 2, where Benicio del Toro plays the Collector, where he went to the Jim Jarmusch School for Hairstyling.
Yeah.
The end of Thor 2 builds up his character and how it's going to be a big thing. The Collector has one scene, and this scene is kind of, I mean, the movie is good. The whole movie is good as a whole.
Yeah.
But this scene with the Collector is a fucking disaster. There's so much happening in this scene, and it's so sloppily put together. We have, okay, so they go to the Collector, and they bring the orb, and Benicio gets to do his thing for maybe 2 minutes. And there's this girl. We only get one build-up of her, unless you count the Thor scene. The only build-up we get to this big, gigantic scene that happens is he has the scene where she's cleaning the glass, and he's telling her she's not cleaning it right. She has to use her elbows. That, of all things, has a gigantic, massive payoff.
Yeah.
Where, okay, so she's basically had enough of his shit. So she uses the orb to blow his entire building up. No spoilers, nobody dies except for her. And while this is right in the middle of the Collector scene, we have this scene where right in the middle it just cuts, and we go to this really out-of-place scene where Batista finds a way to call Ronan and bring him to where they are.
Yeah.
Just some random dude he happened to look over and see. And all this happens, Ronan just shows up like 30 seconds later. And this scene is just a big clusterfuck. And it really disappointed me that that was the big Collector scene that they built up to from Thor 2. Because I was really looking forward to see Benicio play that character in like a full role.
Definitely.
But he almost had as much screen, like he had just a little more screen time here than he does in the post-credits scene of 4.
Could it be possible they're saving him for the sequel?
I don't know.
I don't know anything about Guardians of the Galaxy canon at all, so...
Yeah, this is all, you know, new to me. Like, I was one of the ones where when we saw Thanos at the end of the Avengers, okay, I'll Wikipedia that when I get home.
Yeah.
But no, apart from that, oh yeah, and they do the thing where, just because movies have to do this, Star-Lord and Zoe Saldana's character have a love story of sorts. And the reason this happens is because there's no connection between them whatsoever until one scene where they go out on a balcony and they switch sob stories. And then it just happens. I don't know. Well, they don't really go into it after that, and they kind of use it as a joke, but still, that they even went there at all is kind of pointless. And it felt a little like filler, and because these two characters exist, this must happen. That's it.
Yeah.
Glenn Close is here for like a couple of minutes. John C. Reilly is barely there despite his, I thought I heard him in the trailers. I assume he was used a lot. His character has a nice little payoff later. Everybody kind of has their big moment, no matter how small it is. Rooker has a really badass moment during the final battle. That was very, reminded me a lot of a scene in Batman Returns.
Yeah.
So yeah, most of it really works. Some of it, not so much, but the stuff that does work overpowers the stuff that doesn't. Like the Force soundtrack and the Force Blood story, and that fucking abomination of a collector scene. So yeah, I'm sure fans of, like, you know, the source material will be just fine with it. So I'm sure they already are. I'm sure they all went last night.
Well, the people that were talking it up heavily last night and read all the reviews and everything, did that do anything to like change your opinion of the movie, or did you just not?
I just didn't listen to anything. I tried to not go in with any expectations, even though it was on my most anticipated list. But that was mainly on the grounds of just the Marvel Universe in itself. Because the whole thing, I think, is awesome the way they put it together.
Well, one thing before we go into the next movie, because I know exactly where we're going.
A couple of other people show up. I didn't know this until we were watching the credit roll. Nathan Fillion's in the prison.
Mm-hmm.
Rob Zombie's voice is there. I think James Gunn did a cameo voice.
I believe so.
And if you watch the whole credit roll till the very end, which is the whole reason you're there, I'm sure, watching the credits, I mean, you will see no raccoons or tree creatures were harmed in the making of this movie.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, that's what that is.
We had some issues. Apparently, there were some theaters that got the wrong movie.
Yes.
I wanted to mention that before we get...
I knew it was going to be The Rise of the Guardians or Legend of the Guardians, the one about the owls, but it was the other one.
Yeah.
Okay, our second movie is Get On Up, the James Brown biopic by the director of The Help. I don't know if I've gotten a chance to talk about this yet or not, but I fucking hate The Help.
Yeah.
I really, really do. And the fact that we had the director of The Help doing a musical biopic on one of the biggest names in the industry had Masterpiece of Manipulation written all over it. And I actually wrote down all the movies I was expecting. Like, when you go in, I mean, I know you're supposed to go in open-minded, but to be totally honest, when it comes to musical biopics, they always come with a fucking checklist.
Yeah.
So I wrote down all the movies I was expecting to see. There was Ray, there was Cadillac Records, there was Dreamgirls, there was Sparkle, there was Walk the Line. Anyway, we just saw Jersey Boys. I was expecting a little bit of that.
Yeah.
No, it's not quite like that.
Nope.
Well, we do have the Walk the Line opening,
yeah,
where we have the scene where he's basically at the point in his life where the movie's about to end, and you can hear the crowd out there chanting his name. The only thing James Brown wasn't doing was moving a circular saw with his thumb. And yeah, we do get the childhood flashback straight out of Ray, of course, where our help cast comes back. His mom that abandoned him, of course, is Viola Davis, and James Brown is raised in a brothel. I didn't realize he was Sweetback.
Yeah.
And the brothel is basically run by Octavia Spencer. And she basically brings him up after his mom basically abandons him, and then his dad basically leaves him at this brothel with a mule. And that's okay. Well, first off, this movie was kind of confusing me for the first hour or so because the timeline is really messed up. The timeline is really confusing, even more so than in Jersey Boys. Because we have the very beginning where he's like old, and the movie's gonna end later, and we have the childhood flashbacks, and we keep cutting to this press conference. I think that's like around the time of like the '60s or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go through, and I thought we were done with the childhood flashbacks because we see him as a child, and then the story progresses, and he's like young James Brown, and he's a young teenager or early 20-something getting into trouble. Like he evolved there, and that we were done with that. But no, after that evolution happens, and we see him go from child to young guy, we still get childhood flashbacks. And then sometimes we go to like when he's kind of older, and then we go back to when he's young, and then the jumps as the movie progresses, the jumps in time get bigger and bigger. So that was all over the place. But no, apart from that, we do have it does do some unique things, like having him break the fourth wall a lot. It seems cheesy when you just say it like that, but in the context, it kind of works.
Yeah.
There's a really, really great scene. And to talk about that scene, I'm going to go ahead and rave about Chadwick Boseman, because I'm sure you've been hearing that. There was one critic, I think it was the guy that writes for Time, he said not only should you give him the Oscar, you should give him every award, the Nobel Prize, and induct him into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Yeah, I mean, it kind of sounds like overhyped when you put it this way, but in total honesty, there's a fun, we talked about this when I did the Ray video with Walk the Line. What I didn't really think Jamie Foxx did very well, despite being an Oscar-winning performance, is there's that fine line between when you're playing a person in a movie and when you become the person you're portraying and when you're just doing an imitation of them, or an impression of them. Which I kind of felt was the Jamie Foxx case with Ray. Watching Chadwick Boseman as James Brown, a lot of the time, I totally forgot I was watching an actor.
Yep.
I mean, you want to talk about becoming your performance. And the creepy thing is it seems like they barely put makeup on him.
Yeah.
Like just a tiny bit of makeup is on him, and that's it.
Change his hair a bit, that's about it.
But yeah, and you, like obviously he just came off of 42. The only thing he did in between, I think, was Draft Day. Mm. And the thought was, okay, this guy's just going to do biopics forever, so when he does James Brown, it's just going to be, hey, the guy that played Jackie Robinson doing James Brown. There were times where I actually forgot.
Yeah.
But then it's not just the over-the-top stuff either, and it's not just, putting the voice on, but there's usually after a while you can kind of start to wear thin a little bit doing the performance, and there'll be like portions in the middle of the movie that nobody really cares about, and they're just kind of throwaway scenes where it's just kind of the actor kind of going through the lines just to get to the next big moment. Every single frame that Boseman is in, he is as deep in character as you can possibly get.
Definitely.
It's like every single time before a camera started rolling, he had done every possible preparation he could possibly muster. And it really, really pays off on the screen. But it's not just like the over-the-top stuff and the voice and all that and the makeup. It's, there's one scene in particular that really, really stood out. And it kind of combated what I was saying in my head, oh, here come the cliches. The movie's not innocent, the cliches do come. But there's this scene where they have, it's Christmas, and they're outside, and he's in the Santa suit, and he's, like, you know, passing stuff out to the children, and then there's a guy there that's kind of eyeballing his wife because she's dressed kind of provocatively. And it's like he's just gonna let it go. He's kind of mad, but he's just gonna let it go. So the scene ends, and they go inside. He's still in his Santa suit.
Yeah.
And he just starts to beat the shit out of her. And then after he's done that, he kind of walks up to the camera. And that breaking the fourth wall I was talking about. He doesn't say anything, and he doesn't even do anything. He's just standing there. And then he kind of glances at the camera, like he suspects that the audience is judging him. Like we, as the audience, are judging him.
Yeah.
That might be the most powerful shot in the movie. Just that look he gives into the camera really briefly. But yeah, you get to this, I mean, it's great at the start, because it's like, well, you know, some cliches are here, like the childhood flashbacks, but it's still kind of got its own thing happening. But then there's this middle ground that kicks in, because the movie's 2 hours and 20 minutes. There was bound to be a dry spot, and it does come, unfortunately. There's this whole middle ground where they basically rely on the cliches, like there's the domestic disputes, there's the throwing things in anger, there's the rise to fame causes his arrogance, like he starts to walk all over his friend, who's played by Nelson Ellis, who's also really good.
Yeah. Who's
basically the guy that stands by him no matter what, but Brown still walks all over him anyway, even though he gave him a place to stay when he had just gotten out of prison and stuff like that. And he makes everybody call him Mr. Brown. Like, there's this, the great scene where he does the split, and he splits his pants, and Frankie Avalon comes over to congratulate him, and he's like saying, you know, you were really good out there, James. Call me Mr. Brown. And he's not even famous at that point, really. He's just getting started, and he's making people call him Mr. Brown. No, it doesn't go to every cliche. One of the very first things I told you was, if there is a montage of success set to I Feel Good in this movie, yeah. I swear to God. But I Feel Good's in the movie. It's actually in that scene with Frankie Avalon, but no, the success montage set to it didn't happen, so at least had that going for it. And, you know, you do have those cliche lines that play with the time period, like, when Dan Aykroyd's getting him, you know, riled up for the performance, and they're saying, well, you know, you're not going to be the act, you're going to be just opening for the Rolling Stones. And he tries to comfort him by saying, the Rolling Stones, they'll be nobodies in a year. I think a movie this year already made that joke about the Rolling Stones, but I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, I think so.
Now, there are some more good things. One thing that's really admirable about it is they absolutely you have to always worry about this in a biopic, but they do not glamorize him whatsoever.
No.
Not at all. I mean, yeah, on the stage, you know, they made him, you know, on the stage, you know, how could you not glamorize him? Because that's not even glamorizing him, that's just showing the way it was. But, yeah, you would think, you know, the things he had done, they would kind of, especially a movie by the guy that directed The Help. But no, they really get down to the nitty-gritty of the reprehensible things that he would do. I do love the PG-13 F-bomb scene.
Yes.
I really love that. They did it twice, but they handled the twice really well, because finally they just get fed up with him and they say, you know, fuck you. And I love Boseman, even though it's kind of cliche, you know, you got the angry person throwing shit.
It's still awesome.
But I just love that delivery of, you don't say fuck you to James Brown. So, now, and the editing is actually kind of inspired. I mean, it seems like it might be trying to be a little too over-stylized and overly flashy, but still, you know, it kind of gave it a unique feel, like, the scene where he's narrating and talking, and then it cuts to a totally different scene and him in a totally different place in mid-sentence, and he keeps talking on the same sentence he was on. And the splicing together of the archive footage and the movie footage, like especially the performances, like where it's Chadwick Boseman on stage, and then they cut to like the black and white footage of the actual crowd cheering during that particular concert. It seems a bit gimmicky, but it kind of works in context. but still, it's kind of bogged down by a lot of things. Like I said, there's like a whole section in the middle devoted to just the cliche portion. It starts to get heavy on symbolism. There's one scene where I was like, I know this scene's probably a little harsh, but there's one scene towards the very end where I was like, okay, I can forgive the cliches now. The movie's pretty good. There's a shot we get. It's not real. It's a symbolic shot of Viola Davis in the back of a police car.
Yeah.
And in my head, I was like, oh, fuck you, movie. Just get that shit out of here. And then they do it again with little James Brown. Don't ask. Please don't ask. But no. And it doesn't, yeah, even though it does have those moments of inspiration, for the most part, it doesn't really feel that unique with all the other musical biopics.
No.
It has those moments, but it doesn't stick to them, really. So if there had been more of those, I think the movie could have been something really great. But I think it's just going to be one of those movies where Chadwick Boseman's performance is pretty much the only thing that's talked about with it. And that's pretty much the only reason it exists, so we could have that, be graced with that performance.
And there's several movies every year that have just one or two performances, and that's all they're good for. The movies are not universally liked.
Being it's from the director of The Help, you're probably curious about Viola Davis and Octavia Spencer. Octavia Spencer's just kind of there.
Yeah.
I mean, she's fine. She doesn't do anything like bad or anything, but she's just, you know, there. Her part's really tiny is the deal. She probably could have done more with it. And then Viola Davis has her big Oscar scene. I don't think it's going to be a success or anything. I think it's just a,
It's another Oprah.
She's basically wearing Oprah's makeup from The End of the Butler. by the end. And she basically has a reverse version of her You Is Kind bullshit from The Help, that big scene. Her big Oscar clip they used in every single award show. And she lost. So yeah, it's alright, but the main reason to see it is Boseman's performance. That's pretty much the only thing it's going to be remembered for.
He does become James Brown. Like, there are lots of times there's sometimes at the very end of the movie there is a concert scene and they're intercutting the shots of the original concert and the concert in the movie, and it looks almost identical. It's just insane how crazy. And he did not have very much time to learn how to dance like James Brown, and that's not something that's easy to do.
While we were waiting, we were the only ones in there.
Yeah.
While we were waiting for the movie to start, we actually looked up if he did his own singing or not. It seems he didn't, but even so, you know.
He did. He does sing in the movie.
Yeah. That little scene where he and the guy are in like the doctor's office,
but most of the time he is lip syncing. But then again, when it comes down to it,
so did Jamie Foxx.
Exactly. And he's an Oscar winner.
We can't all be as great as Joaquin Phoenix doing the whole shebang, but
yeah,
whatever. Okay, now we're going into the limited release for today, which I've seen a lot of advertising for it, despite its really tiny release, which is weird. Our third movie today is Calvary, which is the second, I think, movie from John Michael McDonough, who is the brother of Martin McDonough, the director of In Bruges and Seven Psychopaths. And he did The Guard. And the plot is actually quite simple. We have this priest who is Brendan Gleeson, and it gets started right away. The very first scene of the movie is this mysterious person coming in for a confession that we don't see. And they talk about how they were raped and molested by a priest, and they want to kill the priest that molested them, but he's dead now, so they can't. So for some reason, he wants to kill a priest that's good, I guess, and he's just chosen Brendan Gleeson's character. And he says, in a week, I'm gonna kill you, and then he leaves. And we basically go through that week until we get to the big climatic scene. Now, okay. First off, it's really hard not to. I really wish I could do this review without constantly comparing the director to his brother. But the problem is, I really liked The Guard. I liked The Guard. I didn't love it the way I love In Bruges or Seven Psychopaths, but I liked The Guard. So with that, I kind of figured maybe I'd be alright with this. I was actually quite excited for it. But Well, first off, the tone. Okay. The thing that Martin McDonagh does so well. I'm already beginning the comparisons. The thing that Martin McDonagh does so well is the way he seems to impossibly balance tone. Seven Psychopaths got a lot of issues with that, but In Bruges is like perfect. In Bruges is a perfect movie in general. How it's this really horrifically violent, extremely heartbreakingly tragic, yet hilarious black comedy. Is something that I don't think can be matched. He proved even himself with Seven Psychopaths being great, but not that great. These movies seem a lot more... I don't know. One of the points... Okay. One of the complaints that Seven Psychopaths got a lot was how self-aware it seemed. And how in love with it... How in love with himself Martin seemed to be when he wrote it. This has a lot of that. This has a lot of, like, symbolism and these clever lines. Like, there's this whole thing about the third act revelation that they talk about, which, you know, you could say. They're talking about third act revelation and then third act of a movie, so on.
Yeah.
There's a line that I wanted to beat myself over the head after hearing, which was, because you can just see... I mean, I hate to put it this way because you never know for sure, but I could imagine him just writing, just laughing to himself. They're in the church, and a guy wants to talk to him. So Brendan Gleeson motions to a pew and says, "Take a pew." Literally. I fucking hated that line, by the way.
That sounds kind of annoying.
And it doesn't even... There's really nothing that builds. Like, it starts to build in, like, the last 20 minutes or so. Like, after this confession happens and they set that up to be the plot of the movie, it's basically just meandering throughout and doing random things. There's a subplot where he has a daughter that's played by Kelly Riley. And every single scene that Kelly Riley in is so redundant. It's like, they just walk around and they talk. And it's like every scene is basically a different take that they didn't use of the last scene they did. And it's like that for her the whole movie. They could have taken out her character's entire story and I wouldn't have given a shit. like her in Flight. Nothing against her or anything, she just seems to be playing those characters that are kind of worthless within their movies. And a lot of it just feels like, and the thing is there are fans of the movie that I've read, and they talk about how, you know, darkly hilarious it is. Black comedy is my favorite genre, as you know. I really, really love good, dark humor. I didn't see anything funny about this. It felt like a straight drama. Like, there were a couple of things, like, a character that Aidan Gillen plays has a couple of scenes that are kind of funny, but it's so... I couldn't tell if it was just trying to be super, super dark, and when it was just drama. I don't even remember laughing at anything, really. And one of the great things, once again, that Martin has in his movies, like In Bruges and Seven Psychopaths, is those side characters. Like, In Bruges has, like, Jimmy and Yuri and the woman that ran the hotel, and the American tourist. And Seven Psychopaths has a whole array of characters. All the side characters here are just kind of there to be in the background and provide commentary and mock the protagonist. There's this character named Leo that is so grating, I almost wanted to stop the movie for a second. Or at least fast forward through him. But I couldn't, obviously, so... And then there's a scene with, I was really, like, amped up for one scene that happens, because, Brendan Gleeson's son, who is really taking off right now, is in the movie also. And there's a scene where they just have a scene where they're sitting across from each other talking, and I was like, oh my god, this should be awesome. That scene kind of happens and has no context. The movie just keeps meandering through its 100-minute runtime until we get to the ending. And that's... And the story, I guess, kept losing me because the scenes are just... The whole movie just seems so pointless. That every time a scene happens, by the time we were at the next scene, I would almost have completely forgotten the scene before it. Because everything just felt like it was going nowhere. Like I said, obviously we're going to this climax where the confessor confronts him and we find out who it is. But we just take such a blank road to get there. There's a couple of things that he does to intimidate him, like set his church on fire, and shock surprise, as you'll see in every single one of these movies, they kill his dog, you know, to say, ooh, we're, you know, coming for you, I guess. And now, about that being, like, it's basically kind of supposed to be a mystery as to who the confessor is, because we don't see his face. They cheat and change his voice when he's confessing. But the thing is when all I did was I looked at the cast list before I watched the movie to see who was in it, to see if there were any, like, McDonough regulars in it. And I just looked at this cast list, and when I looked at that list, I guessed who it was. Like, I was just like, they're in this? I'll bet it's them. So you watch the movie, and they play up the confessor as a big secret and a big mystery that's going to have a gigantic reveal at the end. As soon as I saw the actor that I pinpointed from the cast list in the movie, I mean, they don't really do anything to out themselves, but just as soon as I saw him, I was like, yeah, that's him. Do you want to guess if I was right or not?
I have a feeling you probably were.
Now, having said that, the ending scene is really good. But we had 100 minutes of the movie to get there. That just felt completely and totally pointless. And that basically sums up this whole movie. Just meandering and pointless. And totally forgettable. So that sucks and it's a total disappointment. So, I don't know, maybe I won't be... This is like with me and Paul Thomas Anderson and The Master. I got really, really excited before. It's probably going to be hard for me to get excited again when they come back. So, we'll see what happens. Our fourth movie is going again in this indie sci-fi vein that's been going on called The Signal. Not to be confused with that other movie. This is kind of in that indie sci-fi vein, like Another Earth and Upstream Color and Under the Skin most recently. I brought it before that shitty movie Extraterrestrial. That was kind of one. This kind of falls in with those. And it begins with... Let me start off by saying, much like Calvary, there's a big mystery in this movie that is really, really ridiculous in how obvious it is. But let me tell you the plot. In case you're hearing about this for the first time. Our lead character is Brenton Thwaites, who you know I really hated in Oculus and Maleficent. He's actually not bad here. It might just be the material he had in the other movies. Because here being the lead, he's actually not that bad in an indie movie. You have him, his girlfriend, and his best friend. And they're kind of on this road trip. And it's actually, they set you up to believe it's one thing, but it's actually another. They're basically looking for this hacker that calls himself Nomad, who's basically, like, taunting them for some reason that we don't really know. There's a mystery surrounding it. But the real reason they're on this road trip is actually to, his girlfriend is moving for, like, a year or so. She's going away. So we have the little character development where they have to deal with, you know, not seeing each other while she's gone and how he's dealing with that. While simultaneously he and the friend are trying to track down Nomad because they track him down and they manage to be in his area, so they're going to go investigate. It kind of felt like the scene in Catfish when they first investigated.
Nice.
So they go, and it kind of has the feel of a found footage horror movie for kind of the beginning a little bit. Because we see the footage through their camera and they have to go into a dark room. They have the shaky cam. There's the scene where one character scares another. There's a nosebleed in this movie. There's a couple of them. That is the we're desperate for horror thing. But no, this isn't a horror. It feels that way for the first 15 minutes or so, but this isn't a horror movie or anything. I was getting a lot of vibes of Absence as well. But no, this isn't that kind of movie, thankfully. Instead, when they get to this place where they're gonna find Nomad, it looks like we see her like fly into the air and they go after her and then the screen goes white. And then he's face to face with Lawrence Fishburne in a hazmat suit. And Lawrence Fishburne's really good in this, even though he basically just has to do his Morpheus thing. He has to do like scientific talk in that slow voice of his. Now, this is a gigantic story point. So, I'm not trying to be spoilery. I'm just talking to you as a logical person. The big twist in this movie is... Well, not twist, but the big question in this movie is who is Nomad? And what is he doing? And what does he want? We're immediately introduced to Lawrence Fishburne's character. Lawrence Fishburne's name is Damon. Just think about that for like 10 seconds.
The awkward laughter is why I thought about it like that.
So anyway,
yeah.
now that I haven't spoiled anything,
nice.
The movie goes on, and it's actually, despite that bullshit, that a 5-year-old can figure this out bullshit, the movie's actually pretty interesting from then on, because it's got more going on than just that.
Yeah.
It's got it's got this really big mystery around it, where you basically have no idea what's going on. But enough has happened at this point to where you actually care and you actually want to figure out what's happening. And the way it unfolds is pretty, it's put together pretty well as far as pacing and story and stuff like that. I was getting real Twilight Zone vibes from it. And once again, as much as I hate to say it, despite that also, if you've ever once seen a Twilight Zone episode in your life, you can probably figure out the ending too. Because there's a couple of big reveals. I'll leave you with that. And there's a couple of side characters. There's Lin Shaye is in it, who's always interesting when she shows up. You probably mainly know her either from the Fairly Brothers movies or Insidious. She plays this crazy ass religious woman that seems to be totally out of her mind and oblivious to the world around her. And she's only in a couple of scenes, but they're very interesting, kind of disturbing scenes that really are good within the tone. Now, it's one of those movies where it doesn't always work when it's trying to be super serious, but it's got, for an indie movie, it's got surprisingly good effects. They're convincing enough, anyway. Probably better than some of the mainstream effects you've seen lately. And there's a lot of like visuals. Like there's some scenes that really stand out as far as how they were just how they just look aesthetically. But there's not really a whole lot I can say without giving too much away, because like I said, apart from the obvious stuff that you can figure out immediately, even if they treat it as a twist, you're still never quite sure what's totally going on, which is interesting. Yeah, there are some really intense scenes, but yeah, I'd say I'd like it pretty well. I'd say I'd recommend it, just as long as you don't figure things out too easily. I'd say sci-fi fans will like it pretty well, especially if they're into that indie sci-fi thing, like Another Earth and movies like that. I'm really surprised Britt Marling wasn't in this movie, actually. Okay. Our fifth movie is Cuban Fury, which is out on DVD now. I'm a little behind on it, but Cuban Fury is a comedy that was basically masterminded by Nick Frost. And it's about salsa dancing. It's a comedy about salsa dancing starring Nick Frost. Are you intrigued already? Because I was.
Sounds awesome.
This starts and we get his whole backstory about, he and his sister were basically the ultimate salsa dancing champions when they were kids. And it was basically his whole world. But one day, he was on his way to the giant competition. And his coach was waiting for him. His coach is Ian McShane.
Nice.
And he was on his way there, and he ended up getting stalked by bullies and got the shit beat out of him, and they basically stole his stuff and told him salsa's for pussies. And that basically got infused in his brain forever. He called up Ian McShane, and he says, "Where are you? Why aren't you here for the competition?" And he says, "Salsa's for pussies," and hangs up on him. And they don't talk again for 25 years. And he abandons salsa forever. He goes to work in an office. He forgets totally about it. His sister's Olivia Colman, who is always wonderful. She goes off and becomes a bartender, and it's just in their past. Well, one day, he and his, at first I thought they were friends, but they're actually enemies. His coworker is Chris O'Dowd, who basically spends the whole movie making fun of him, or doing various things. Like, he's the guy where, Nick Frost goes up to the water cooler and is about to get a drink with his little plastic cup. And Chris O'Dowd's the guy there with a big-ass water bottle that gets there first and takes the rest of the water that's in the cooler. There's a funny scene where he calls up Nick Frost at his desk and he's just like, "Do you like scary films? I was doing Scream and you totally fell for it." Chris O'Dowd is always hilarious. I'm a huge fan of him. And then the plot comes into play when he and Chris O'Dowd become rivals, not only in the office, but for the heart of Rashida Jones, who is their new boss. And it just so happens, one day he's out at the bar. He has these two friends, and they basically they're all losers. And all they do is they hang out, and they do the thing where they call it the weekend roundup, where how much contact they had with a woman over the week. Where it's like, were you like in the close vicinity of the skin of a woman? One day they're at the bar just doing that, and he sees Rashida Jones walk by, and he follows her. And wouldn't you know it, Rashida Jones is a salsa dancer. And he wants to win her heart by any means necessary. So he's got to dig into his past and start all over again. He's got to try to reunite with Ian McShane, even though Ian McShane is still pissed about all that, because now he runs like basically a tiny little food cart. And that's what the story is, and it goes from there. This movie is really funny, and I would highly recommend it. It's just a really delightful movie too. Like, it's a really feel-good movie. Like with the exception of even with the Chris O'Dowd character, like, even though he's kind of a mean-spirited character, they never get, like, totally carried away with it. It's always, like, even though it's an R-rated movie, just for the language, it's a really kind of happy atmosphere. The drama's not too intense and tries to overdo it. It's always balanced out with something funny. We have the misunderstanding scene, which would be, you know, reprehensible in any other movie, but they make it funny because it basically involves Nick Frost showing up at a door and seeing Chris O'Dowd in the background wearing no pants, doing a pose. That's what causes the big misunderstanding. So, as long as they always do something funny with it. There's this great scene where they basically have a face-off. And it's not like one of those big emotional, you know, "why are you always picking on me" scenes or anything like that. Nick Frost and Chris O'Dowd have a salsa dancing duel in a parking garage. And that scene is fantastic. It reminded me of the end of Undercover Brother.
Nice.
And it's worth noting, there's a cameo in that scene. Because it does the Wayne's World thing. They have to stop their duel because they're in a parking garage for a car to drive by. And the person that's in the car just kind of looks out, like they have no idea what's going on, and they drive by, and that's all the cameo is. You can probably immediately guess who it is without even looking. Did you look it up?
No. I'm guessing I know what it is.
You probably know. And yeah, it does have those things, like, it does have cliches, but the movie and the characters are just way too likable to even care. Like, whenever a cliche happened, I was like, alright, it suits the story. That's fine. He has a friend who's, like, really, really flamboyant and gay, and they make jokes like that. His friend is played by, the guy... Remember, the ostrich guy in Four Lions?
Yeah.
That guy.
Nice.
The guy that had to wear the ostrich suit. Ian McShane is really good here as the hardened teacher. There's the scene when he's trying to basically, you know, toughen Nick Frost up. He's like, you know, are you going to do this, or are you going to go hide under your blanket and watch Bridget Jones too? His friend is hilarious, even if he's a bit of a cliche, over-the-top character. He's the guy that basically convinces Nick Frost to, like, shave his entire body and put on a fake tan. And he likes to quote movies from the 80s, like Back to the Future and The Goonies. He does the whole McFly thing. He does the whole Sean Astin speech from The Goonies. Apparently this movie's from 1985, is all he knows. Yeah. And there's some good visual gags, too. Like I said, the whole, you know, salsa dancing duel. And then there's this scene that's a lot like... It's like out of a classic comedy where Nick Frost gets really... It seems like just kind of random, but it's just... It feels like such a classic thing. Like a silent comedy kind of thing where, Nick Frost is in the office and he gets mad, so he punches the wall, but he gets his arm stuck and kind of has to play off like it's not like that. Like somebody comes up and asks him to sign something and he has to kind of play off that this isn't happening right now. So yeah, I really highly recommend this. That especially Chris O'Dowd is so great in this. Playing that, because he usually plays the likable guy, but he's really sleazy here. Like, obviously Nick Frost looks like he does. And they're basically talking about their battle for Rashida Jones, and Chris O'Dowd just delivers the line, women like that talk to guys like you to ask about people like me.
Yeah.
He's that guy, and he plays it so well. But yeah, and Nick Frost is a really good, appealing lead here. Like, he seems like an odd choice for a salsa dancer, but that's basically the whole movie's concept that he created. So, yeah, he's really, really great here. This guy might even be more likable than Danny Butterman.
Wow.
So yeah, I would definitely check this out. You know, like I said, it's already on DVD now, so it shouldn't be that hard to find. Okay. I'm trying to split up the movies we have, and I'm trying to put at least either one documentary or one foreign movie at the end of every video so I can get rid of them. I could come across a good one. I'm open-minded like that. But we're going with a documentary today. This documentary is called The Internet's Own Boy, The Story of Aaron Swartz, which I'm sure you've heard about now because it's like it's a big deal. Especially on the internet because of the person in question. This guy was lightly touched on in the documentary America, if you remember that review. Not worth it. The same footage that was used in that is used here, but pretty much America, they had no idea what they were talking about. Here is a whole story devoted to him. Now, not to make light of anything, it was January of last year, this guy committed suicide when he was 26. But he didn't leave a note, so nobody really knows, like, what happened or why, really. It could have been a lot of reasons. Because he was, like, a complex dude. And we see him, like, from the very start to the very end. At the very start of it, we see, like, home movies of him as a kid with his brother and how... Basically, when he was a 5-year-old kid, he was already a genius of sorts. And it only got more and more so as he got older. And he was the guy that, like, he took a big part in creating Reddit, I think, and he was big on stopping SOPA, the Stop Online Piracy Act. He was big into that. And he just wanted people... His main goal in life was for people to have as much information as they possibly could, like creating search engines and doing all that. But there were always, like, higher-ups and the powers that be that always tried to, you know, stop him or bring him down or shut him up for one reason or another. But the problem here is, it's not with the story of his life. The problem is, I think this might be one of those documentaries that would work better as, like, a biopic as opposed to a documentary, because this documentary is like an hour 45 or so, and it doesn't really do much as far as pulling you in or making... I mean, it worked for a lot of people. A lot of people love this movie, and it's probably like a major contender for the Oscar documentary. A documentary Oscar, but... I don't know. Well, the problem here is, one of the things I talked about, like, it's not this bad or anything, but like I talked about with America, one of the main problems is we don't get two sides of it, because they don't interview anybody that wasn't on his side. It's all friends and family and people that were behind him and people that thought of him as like the second coming, or the only ones interviewed. And we see a lot of graphs and a lot of information is thrown at us, and just a lot of, you know, and it's not even like, a lot of it's hard to keep up with because they're just, it's not even really about him as a person or what he was doing. It's just like they're just throwing constant information at you that's just about stuff that's not really what they should be focused on. The closest we get, like, they build him up to be this giant saint, when, if anything, it should make him, you know, more human, and show us, you know, all of the sides. And the closest we get to that is when they interview, like, his girlfriends, and they talk about him. But apart from that, it just built him up into, like, this deity of sorts, and all the information they're just throwing at you at once, basically, it's kind of too fast, and it basically makes the documentary feel, like, muddled. Like, there's no pace to it. There's no really big scene or anything. Like, there's no big revealing interview, or there's no big revealing piece of information. There's no particular piece of anything that stands out in it. It's just kind of them talking about how great he was, and how horrible these people were, and how they dragged him down, and that eventually led to his suicide, perhaps. I kept spacing out, because after a while it just got redundant and boring, and like I said, I wanted to care about the dude because he did do a lot of things, and he did kind of, like, he was overpowered by people that, you know, were much bigger, but you can only hear, you know, oh, he tried to do this and people said no, like, 10 times over, only so many times before it's just like, okay, can you give us a new piece of information? We kind of know that by now. But that's pretty much all the movie is for its an hour and 45-minute runtime or so. So, I think there was, like, a good, like, you see those documentaries that almost, the information and the stuff that happens in it is so enthralling that it almost feels like you're watching a thriller as opposed to a documentary. I feel like this could have been one of those, but the way they put this together is just, it's just an endless array of interviews and graphs and highlighting words and shit. So yeah, well, so it'll probably be a contender as far as awards are concerned in the documentary category, but that's, I think they could have put it together a little better and made it more able to grab you more.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that's about it for us.
Alright, so one more time, we're going to run through everything, yay or nay. Guardians of the Galaxy?
Yeah, definitely.
Get On Up?
It's alright. I'd wait till, like, rent it or something.
Mm. Calvary?
A lot of people love it, but it wasn't for me.
The Signal?
Yeah, if you're curious, I'd totally check it out, even though, you know.
Mm. Cuban Fury?
Yes, definitely find that if you can.
And The Internet's Own Boy?
Once again, a really positive reaction coming from everywhere, but that's just not my thing to watch a whole bunch of interviews about the same topic for about 2 hours.
Alright, so ends another edition of AJ's Movie Reviews. Next week, we're going to see Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Into the Storm, Step Up, All In, and The 100-Foot Journey. And AJ, you have a couple... We have 2 more on that video as well, but we don't know what they're going to be. I will say right now, as you probably prepare to roll your eyes, Sharknado 2 is coming to pop in the next couple of weeks. Don't know exactly when, but it'll be here soon. And continue to watch Versus, which will be out on Sunday. True Crime will be your cryptic comment for this week, so check that out on Sunday. So go out, watch a movie, and enjoy yourself. So, AJ, any parting words?